Hello, welcome to my JavaScript primitive type video. As I explained in my introduction to variables video, we can create JavaScript variables using the keyword var. Now that we understand that, I'm going to be introducing to you some more JavaScript jargon, and actually it's more so computer science jargon, that will help you become a better programmer. It's going to give you a solid foundation so you can speak about programming concepts intelligently and precisely. So the first concept I'm going to introduce to you is the idea of declaring a variable. So when we write a variable without giving a value to that variable, that is called declaring. Now, declaring is just that. There is no value. However, when we write a variable and we do give it a value, that is called initializing a variable. So there is a small difference. Obviously, one has a value, one has not. It's good to know this because there will be times in your computer science journey where you will want to differentiate between a value or a variable that has a value and a variable that does not have a value. So moving on, I would like to speak about name convention. So with JavaScript, you can name a variable pretty much anything. However, there are a few rules, and the one big rule that I'm going to touch on in this video is that you cannot name a variable using a keyword. A keyword that we cannot use, for example, is the keyword const. We'll see later that const is a keyword that's used to actually declare a different type of variable. As you can see in this example, the JavaScript interpreter throws us an error. Now we're going to speak a little bit about naming conventions. When you write your program, the thing about being a programmer is you want to be consistent in your naming convention of your variables. So when you create variables, you want to know that if you ever need to call it later on in the program, you want to kind of have an idea of how you wrote the variable to begin with, because maybe you have hundreds of lines in your program and maybe you made it plural and you then write it without the S at the end, and then you have a bug and you have no idea why. So I'm going to give you a very common convention that many programmers use, like myself, and it's called camel case. What camel case is when you have a variable that has two or more words. You begin the first word with a lowercase letter, and then every following word has a capital case letter for the first letter. So if you had a variable that was named New York, it would be little n and then big Y for the York. Good. So now that we covered that, now let's get into a concept that is known as primitive types, which is the foundational building block that our main goal is to discuss in this video. In JavaScript, there are a few different primitive types. I'm going to omit one because it's not important for the purposes of this video and the purposes of my future videos. The first one we're going to speak about is the primitive number type, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's a number. I'm sure you're quite familiar with what numbers are at this point. We have the primitive string type, which is it's essentially characters, but you can just think of it as a word or a letter. We have a Boolean type, which is simply just a true or a false value. And then we have an undefined type, which just means that the value does not actually exist. A little weird, I know. Then we have a null type, and that just means that the value is empty. There's nothing. So those are the types that I wanted to explore in this video. And you can see in the code above, I have an example of every type that I've mentioned. The last thing I do want to discuss in this video is that you can write a variable by initializing it, and then, you can declare a variable and then initialize it on a different line. So above we have the variable giants that does not have a value. That means it was declared but not initialized. And on the following line, we have giants being initialized with a value. So I hope you learned a lot and enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye-bye.